spent a week going on a canoe trip and had a blast. But so we canoed for 3 days, travel 1 day each way, and had canoed for 3 days. And I don't remember which day it was, but we're driving along, and I was in 7th grade, and so what is that, like 13 years old, something like that? And you put a bunch of adolescent kids in canoes on a river, and you tend to get a little bit of chaos. And lots of splashing, lots of tipping, lots of fun. But we came around this one curve, one curve in the river, and there was a tree across the river, as happens, right? And this is the first time I think that I can remember anybody going canoeing. It came around there, and we kind of hit this tree, and our canoe flipped. And I can remember going under the water and getting my head stuck under the log. And I could look up, and I could see the water, at the top of the water. I could see light about right here. And, it's hard to breathe under the water. And I don't know if you've ever had that, but I remember looking up and seeing the water and panicking, as you can imagine, because I couldn't get up. The rush of the current of the water, I couldn't get my feet down. I couldn't grab anything, and I'm swimming like crazy, but I'm swimming against the current, and I couldn't move. And I'm running out of air. It's not like I was prepared for this. And I'm looking up, and I can see the water, and I'm like, I can, it's right there, but I couldn't get to it. And it was probably one of the most clear moments when the Holy Spirit ever spoke to me. Not audibly, obviously, but he spoke to me. I guess maybe not obviously, but he spoke to me and just said, relax. Clear as day. Just completely didn't make sense to me I'm stuck underwater and just stop swimming, stop working, stop the effort. And I just stopped swimming. And the current just swept me out from under the log. And it just come up out of that water, and just the biggest breath I could ever take it in my life, and just this moment of just relax. In the midst of this chaos, in the midst of the struggle, terror, being able to see daylight, see air, see and just not be able to get to it, and then just relax. Just stop. I think we all have favorite words of when we think of our relationship with Jesus, when we think of our faith and our walk and our journey. Maybe it's love, maybe it's peace, maybe it's provision, maybe it's one of the names that we sang this morning of provider, of meeting needs, or whatever the names are. One of my favorite words in the Bible is through. You get through. Nothing lasts forever. We struggle and we get through, and it helps us, and we may not know when we're going to get through, but we know that it's through. And for me, it's a very powerful word, because I don't know, when I'm in the midst of struggles or hardships or obstacles or oppression or whatever it may be, I don't know how long it's going to last, but I hold on to the word through. And we're going to look at that this morning, this idea of through, and I want to take you to the book of Exodus. We're going to look at in Exodus chapter 14. I'm going to read a couple of verses, and I'm going to jump down a little bit. Exodus chapter 14, we're going to read 10 through 22, and then we're going to jump down to verse 29. I want you to have your Bibles. There's some good stuff in here. I'm going to be referring back to some of the verses a few times, so you might want to have your Bibles out or your phones open. So I'm going to jump around a little bit and refer back to some things, so it might help you have that. Exodus chapter 14, 10 through 22. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. They're in a really good mood. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people, get moving. Pick up your staff and raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will charge in after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots and his charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. Then the angel of God who had been leading the people of Israel moved to the rear of the camp. The pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them. The cloud settled between the Egyptian and Israelite camps. A darkness fell. The cloud turned to fire, lighting up the night, but the Egyptians and Israelites did not approach each other all night. Then Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the Lord opened up a path through the water with a strong east wind. The wind blew all that night, turning the seabed into dry land. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground with walls of water on each side. Jump down to verse 29. We're going to read through 31. But the people of Israel had walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground as the water stood up like a wall on both sides. That is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the seashore. When the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Through the water, through this, for me, this is just an incredibly powerful word as we look at what God did for the people in this moment. One of my favorite phrases in Psalm 23 is through the valley of the shadow of death. And sometimes we can forget that when they're in the middle of it, that it's through. I think by the nature of the word through, it means that we're in the middle of something. It means that we're surrounded by something. It means that we're overwhelmed by something. You can't be through it if you're not in it, if you're not in the middle of it. Through, by its nature, by the definition, is in the middle of or in the midst of. And so when we're going through something, we can be surrounded by oppression. We can be surrounded by the thing that seems darkest to us, by what is overwhelming us, by what is discouraging us, by what is a fear of ours. And we can get our eyes off of what we're supposed to be looking at. If you notice, well, the first verses, it says that they looked up and they saw the Egyptians. They got their eyes off of God. God was this big pillar of fire and this big cloud, and he was obvious to them. What they do? They got their eyes off of him and they looked at the army. And when they saw the army, when they saw the enemy, that's when it says they panicked. If you look back at verse 10, difficulties can produce panic. So they didn't have an answer. They didn't have a solution. They didn't know what was going to happen. They were between a rock and a hard place. They had the sea in front of them and the armies behind them, and they couldn't go anywhere. So what did they do? They freaked out. God, what are you going to do? I don't know what, we're dead. And I love how they in the middle of their freaking out, in verse 11, you see they just start firing questions at Moses. Why did you bring us out here to die? We were better off back there. We told you this was going to happen. I want to say, you guys are liars and have short-term memories. Because you go back to chapter 3, and what does it say? God says, I heard their cries. They were crying out for deliverance. Now here they are just a little bit later said, we told you to leave us alone. I mean, when we get in the middle of struggles, when we get in the middle of maybe we're afraid, we're panicking, we don't have answers, we have all kinds of questions, we can lose sense of reality sometimes. And then look at verse 12. Verse 12, they wanted to do something really stupid. They wanted to go back. We'd be better off back in Egypt. Like, really? You would rather be a slave? You want to go back to back-breaking work all day long, no freedoms, no nothing? When we panic, we can really make some bad decisions. Anybody ever? No, you don't have to raise your hands. That's okay. When you're afraid, you can make a poor decision, right? You can make a decision that may impact your life, but you kind of freak out and you kind of panic. Well, that's what they're doing. Send us back. We surrender. We give up. It's okay. Send us back. Take us. We don't want to fight, and we don't want to face this. They were surrounded. They were overwhelmed. They were overcome. They were struggling. And in the midst of that, they got their eyes off of Jesus. They looked at their enemy, and they start making bad choices, and they start asking lots of questions. And lots of questions aren't bad. Questions aren't bad. I think I get the most questions when somebody is going through a hard time, and they want to know why. Why am I experiencing it? Why am I going through this? Why did this happen to us? And it may not have been anything that we did, but something happens to us, and we want to know why. And we can panic for a little bit. But to keep our eyes on Jesus. And it's hard when you're going through something because you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know how dark it's going to get. One of the times that we went whitewater rafting, enjoy whitewater rafting, the guide would tell us, hey, if you get knocked out of the boat here, this is what you need to do. There was one time he said, if you fall out of the boat here, don't look back at me. You just need to swim for all you're worth to this side of the river, because if you don't, you will die. Like, okay, good to know. The other time we were going through a rapids, he said, now in this rapid, there are some eddies, there's some strong current. And if you're floating and your feet are dangling, the water can kind of hold you there. And it'll kind of spin you around. I remember one time I did fall out of the boat, and there was just a rock the size of a house in the middle of the river. It was kind of intimidating. I'm heading right for it. My feet were out in front of me. I'm going towards it, and I just before I hit it, the kind of river just pulled me back because of the current and the power of the river. And it was really kind of freaky that the water is just doing whatever it wanted to me, and I had no control, no power. But I remember him saying, if you get in this situation and you're just kind of in this eddy and you're just kind of swirling around, what you need to do is just pull your legs up into a ball and kind of into a fetal position and hold on to your legs, and you reduce how much the river has to get a hold of, and you become this little ball, and the river will just spit you out. It's kind of cool. So I'm in this eddy, and I pull my legs up, and wouldn't you know it? Just the river just pulled me out and just shot me around and floated down the river, and it was pretty nice. After the panic wore off, I was like, well, that was kind of fun. That was kind of cool. I don't know if I want to do it again, but hey, this kind of, you put your legs up, this is weird. But sometimes when we're going through something and we don't know how long it's going to last, and we can panic, and we need to trust. Like I remembered what our guide said, we have a guide too. He says, I am with you through. I will make a way through. I'm not going to promise how long it's going to take or what the solution is going to be right now. You may not be able to get that, but I'm promising it will be through. You will get there. It will happen. When? I don't know. Look back at the text. Verses 20 and 24. In verse 20 and 24, we have nighttime. So the cloud moves, right? the cloud moves between the Egyptian and the Israelites and forms this barrier. The Israelites are still in the middle of. They still haven't gotten through it. They're in the middle of it. They still have the water on one side. They still have the army on the other. They still have no solution. It starts at night and they don't get a resolution until the next day. They don't know how long it's going to take. How long do they wander in the wilderness? 40 years. They got through. It says he led them through the wilderness. Well, it took 40 years, but he led them through. How long were they in captivity in Babylon? 70 years. He said, but hold on, be patient. I will bring you back. You will get through it. We go through the valley. How long was Jesus in the tomb? 3 days. What were the disciples doing? How long did they know it was going to last? They didn't know. See, there's this whole idea that God understands and we need to trust him in the midst, in the middle of our struggles and our hurt and our heartache and our discouragement and in our depression and in our fear, that we need to trust him. There's a seeming contradiction in here that I want to point out too. Verses 14 and 15. 13, 14, and 15. So in verse 13, what does Moses tell the people? If you have your Bibles, look at, you might want to underline this. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. You don't have to do anything. What you have to do is trust. What you have to have is faith. Stand still and watch. Be patient. Man, that's a terrible word, isn't it? Be patient. I'm not going to go off on that tangent. Be patient. Wait. Be still. Then he says in verse 14, stay calm. What's the worst thing you can do when you're frightened? Is panic. Stay calm. Just breathe. Just relax. Just, when we are afraid, we have one of 4 responses? Fight or flight, right? Scare somebody. What's your first reaction? Ah! I'm going to punch you in the face. Yeah. I was going to say we enjoy doing that in the office, but it's not so much we as it is me. I enjoy a good scare. Fight or flight, those are 2 responses. Freeze. Freeze is another response. You just paralyzed and you don't know what to do. And then the 4th one is like faint, that you just kind of, whether you literally faint or just kind of lose all ability to make any decisions. One of those, it was when town I grew up in, Wakarusa, we had a maple syrup festival. Every year was a long weekend of maple syrup festivals, where I got my love for making maple syrup. But one of the businesses in downtown, I'm not sure, my dad knows this, but one of the businesses downtown, in the back of the store, in one of the rooms, they ran horror movies. And I remember one day I was by myself. I don't know if I was bored or what, and went into the store, and I don't know. I went back there, and it was Alien. Remember the movie Alien? Some of us will say this is one of the best movies ever. But I was back in this room with the small room watching the movie Alien. And at the end of the movie, where the alien gets on the ship. You guys know the movie? The alien gets on the ship, and Ripley doesn't know it, and she goes to get a suit out, and the alien pops out and scares her. I literally dropped to the ground. I got so scared in that moment. I was, 12 years old, 10, 12 years old. And this alien pops out, and I literally lost control of my legs, and I fell to the floor. Everybody in the room kind of laughed at me. I don't understand. But we have this fear response that just kind of takes over us, and we can't control it. Well, Moses is saying, hey, control the fear, control the panic. I know you're panicking. Stay calm. Watch, wait, see what God's going to do. Then what does God tell the people? What does he tell Moses in verse 15? Tell the people to get moving. What are you looking at? Why are you standing here? So it seems like there's this contradiction that Moses says on one hand, well, stay calm, don't worry, be still. And over here, God is saying, what are you doing just standing there? Get moving. And it seems like this contradiction, but in God's definition of things, and in reality, stillness is not nothingness. Because we have stillness, it doesn't mean that we are doing nothing. In that moment when my head was trapped under the log, stillness was the best thing I could do. And when I was still, God delivered, God moved, and God worked. And the whole time I was swimming as hard as I could, as hard as I ever could. I was working against everything that was best for me. And when I stopped and when I was still and I listened to the voice of God say, stop, relax, whew, out I came. And so often in our life, I think in our spiritual journeys and in my own experience, and I think as I've talked to most of you, when we take a breath, our situation and surroundings may not necessarily change immediately, but when we get our eyes off of the enemy and we get our eyes back on God, stillness is not nothingness. Being calm is not nothingness. It is allowing God to work and allowing God to move and allowing God to bring peace to our minds, a sense of calmness to our hearts. We get our eyes back where they're supposed to be, and we get through. And God works, and you see what he does. He said, I'm doing this, and I'm going to bring glory to my name. I'm going to display my glory in your life and to you through this. And all these years later, I still remember that what could have been a traumatic experience has turned into this, man, I heard God speak. I heard God speak to my heart and to my mind. And the joy of being obedient to that and listening to that, of doing something that went against everything that was in my being. Every fiber of my being said, fight, struggle, harder, to just relax. And maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you're fighting and you're struggling and you're wondering and you're worried and you're hurting and you're questioning and you're doubting and you want to go back. God, if you would just take me back here. Man, we can forget quick, can't we? We can forget how terrible and horrible that past was, but because we're struggling, we don't have answers now. We just, let me just go back. At least it was familiar. At least I knew what to expect. God's saying, keep calm, be still, but keep moving. Be still, but keep moving. My glory will be displayed in your life, and I will reveal myself to you at the right time. Keep moving through. It is so easy to be overwhelmed by the middle of the things that we're in, and whatever it is, it could be, a million different things of what you're feeling overwhelmed by. Be still, be calm, keep moving. Don't stand there, don't look around, don't wring your hands, don't panic, don't freak out. Trust God and keep moving. Look back at verse 14 again. Right before he says, just stay calm, what does it say? The Lord himself will fight for you. The Lord himself will fight for you. We want to fight. We want to work. We want to do more. The Lord himself will fight for you. Trust him as you're walking through. Keep your eyes on him. Don't get your eyes off of him and start panicking with everything that's going on around you. Keep your eyes on him. He will lead you through. You will get through this. And we can't compare our struggles and our obstacles and our hurt and our pain to anybody else. We can't compare our timeline to anyone else's. We can't say, well, they went through this and they did this and this happened there, where I'm not seeing that and I'm not experiencing, and that's not my story. We're different. God works differently in each of us. And when we start looking at each other and one another and your life and your story, and you start looking at me and I start looking at them, now we're getting our eyes off of God. Now we're starting to panic. Now we're starting to fret. Now we're starting to wonder. Now we start to get angry. Now we start to say, God, take me back. Stay calm. Keep moving. Keep moving. I was sharing this week with somebody about and I've said this before, and it's because it's so impactful for me, the story of David and Goliath. David remembered the lion. The key to defeating Goliath was the lion and the bear. I know God was faithful then. I know he will get me through this now. Because he didn't disappoint, he didn't fail. God delivered, he will again. And sometimes we need to remember some of those things. Instead of freaking out and panicking at what's in front of us, we need to remember what God has done before. So be still, be calm, keep moving. He will deliver, he will come through, he will and always be faithful. We're going to close with a song. The altar is open. Maybe you're struggling this morning, and maybe you're freaking out a little bit. Maybe you're hurting. Maybe you're wondering, God, what's going to happen? And God is reminding you, or maybe he is telling you, speaking to you, be calm. Relax. Stop fighting. Stop fighting me. Trust me. And I will get you through this. We have our stones up here, that if you need to come up and grab a stone, just to remember through. God will get me through. You want to grab a stone, put a stone in your pocket. You want to leave a stone on the altar as just a testimony to God, I trust you. I'm taking this thing and I'm laying it here. I'm giving it to you. We talked about this a few weeks ago. We don't want to leave our troubles at the door. We want to bring our troubles in here and leave them at the altar. So maybe that rock could be a stone, could be a symbol to you of, here's my trouble, here's the thing I'm struggling with today, here's the thing I'm panicking over, here's the thing I'm freaking out over, and God, I'm giving this to you, and I'm going to be still, and I'm going to be calm, and I'm going to keep walking. I'm going to keep facing this day. I'm going to take the next day and the next day, and I'm just going to keep trusting you. Maybe you want to come and take a stone out of the bowl and just lay it on the altar. You don't have to stay and pray. You can if you want to. You're more than welcome to. But if you want to just take that stone, lay it on the altar, and return to your seat, just as a physical testimony to everybody here, but also to you and God. Say, God, I'm trusting you with this thing. It's yours. It's not mine. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to keep moving. So let's stand together. We're going to sing this song. You respond as God leads.